Luffy's Devil Fruit Awakening, his Gear 5, the most hyped up anime ability in recent years, was revealed in his fight against Kaido in Wano. But what if it wasn't? What if it occurred a little bit earlier in the series? What if, during the events of Marineford, it wasn't Conquerors haki that Luffy unleashed? No, it was the peak of his Devil Fruit ability, Gear 5. What would have changed? How would things have gone? What would have been the result of Marineford? All that and more in this video. Now admittedly at this point we don't know much about Gear 5 other than an introduction to the abilities that we've seen it capable of. We know a lot about the precursing abilities, Gear 2, Gear 3, Gear 4, which is something that we do need to go into for the sake of this, because at the point of Marineford, Gear 4 had yet to be invented, which would probably have some repercussions on how effective Gear 5 would be. Likewise, Luffy was not just a novice at haki, he didn't know about its existence whatsoever. Even though he'd shown the capability of using it, he did not know about it, nor did he know how to use it intentionally. It was all very subconscious acts, it was all very unintentional. But before jumping into the video, I do want to ask that if you do like this video, please do subscribe and consider liking and commenting on the video. It really helps out the channel, and if this video gets 100 likes within the month, I will go to the other end of the spectrum and do a what if video on what if Luffy had no Devil Fruit whatsoever. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over the precursing events to Marineford, because the Straw Hat's adventures, or Luffy's adventures on Sabayori, on Amazon Lily, and then throughout Impel Down, all wouldn't be affected in this what if scenario. The only thing that matters are the events of Marineford. So we're going to start with Luffy, Crocodile, Buggy, Ivankov, and all the other crew of miscreants that got freed from Impel Down falling from the sky. They've jumped out the battle bus and they are falling their way down into the Battle of Marineford. What happens from there? Well, for the most part, it's going to proceed as normal up until a certain point. Now, I did jot down a few ideas of when this could be, but you could also basically choose any point within your own mind. All that seemed to be required for Gear 5 to activate was for Luffy to essentially hit rock bottom, to be at his lowest point, to be worn out, beaten, defeated, and unable to fight on. That was when the Devil Fruit, the Zone Devil Fruit that was later revealed to be the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, which, if you didn't know about that, why are you watching a video about Luffy's Devil Fruit Awakening if you are not already aware of it? Obviously this video is going to contain major spoilers, but yes, it seems that the activation requirement for that just seemed to be get destroyed in a fight, which is a bit suspect because there's been multiple times, post-time skip and pre-time skip, where Luffy has been beaten, he's been down, he's been out, and this hasn't happened yet. I don't know what the requirements for Gear 5 activating were, so we're just going to play it a bit fast and loose with the theories of how this could end up working. There's, it could have worked against Kaido the first or second time he lost the fight. It didn't. Luffy got extremely lucky not to die, but we're going to ignore most of that for the future. In this fight, all that needs to happen in Marineford is for Luffy to get beaten or fall out of the fight and seem to have no way to recover. Now, off the top of my head, I could remember two situations where this seemed to be the case. The first one was when he had effectively just reached his level of exhaustion that was unable to fight past. He's been fighting non-stop through Amazon Lily, then he had a little break, then he went through Impel Down, he got beat by Magellan, he fought his way to free Ace, he had a fight with Blackbeard that didn't go well, and then he had to escape. He suffered through a full 24 hours of pain when Ivankov tried to purge the poison out of his body. And then he just collapsed at Marineford, reaching the limit of what his body was capable of. In that situation, what he ended up doing was having Ivankov inject him with more hormones, some adrenaline, a cocktail of chemicals to rejuvenate him and let him keep on battling. Now, that could be one potential place to do it, but the scene I always remember where I class as for Marineford of Luffy being down and out is when he gets kicked away by Kizaru and Whitebeard catches him in his ridiculously large giant man hands. Now, that's where I'm going to proceed from here. In the actual events of the timeline, Luffy gets up, he's stumbling, he's wobbling, he's trying to get his way back to the fight, but his legs are essentially jelly at this point. It's a miracle that he, managed to continue going at all. So maybe Kizaru kicks him a bit harder this time. Maybe Luffy's legs aren't just jelly, maybe they're just gone altogether. He can't even stand, let alone walk back into the fight. He sees Ace up on the Executioner's platform and he knows deep down that he can't help anymore in this situation. His eyes are fluttering closed in some dramatic display that would look far better in manga form, I'm sure, but Luffy can't continue. And that's when it starts. The drum beats of his heart start going. He starts laughing, which always sounds a bit creepy to me because whenever I imagine Gear 5's laughter, it always goes back to like the Joker in the Batman animated cartoons with Mark Hamill voice acting it, which is always a bit more creepy than I imagine it's supposed to be, or will be when the manga gets transferred into anime form. But that's the laugh that I imagine echoes around Marineford. Some of the higher ups, maybe Sengoku or someone, probably realizes, okay, this is a serious thing happening now, because the thing people need to realize is that the higher ups of the world government, the Gorosei, possibly, people like Kong, the Im definitely, and maybe possibly Sengoku, are fully aware of what the Gum fruit actually is. They're aware that it's a mythical zone devil fruit. They're aware of its prestige, of its past. I said in multiple videos before Gear 5 was revealed that the Gum fruit doesn't deserve the hype it gets. This was a fruit that was escorted under extreme protection from the government. They had like CP9 members, or CP0, whatever who's who was at the time, arrival to rob Luffy, act as a bodyguard just for this single devil fruit. It took a future Yonko crew in Shanks to manage to steal it away from them. Why would a devil fruit that turns someone into rubber have just as much, if not more, hype than the Oppi Oppi no Mi that could make people immortal? Well, it turns out there was actually a reason for that. It's because the mythical nature of this fruit. It's because this is based on a legendary figure. It's because the drumbeats of liberation seem to relate to Joy Boy, an extremely influential person from the Void Century. This is something that the world government are terrified of. So if there's a couple people in the audience at Marineford, I guess you could say, which is probably admittedly just going to be Sengoku, he's probably the only one who's going to hear about stuff like this, they're going to be pretty terrified by this point. The rest of the field don't really know what's going on. Like, Whitebeard stood right next to Luffy, and he's probably seen, like, okay, this weird little rubber kid who's, like, willing to stand up to me, the strongest man in the world, who was dead on his feet a couple of seconds ago, has suddenly gone Super Saiyan, His hair's bleached white, his eyes have gone white, he's got this weird flaming robe thing extending around his neck. I don't know what's going on, but this could possibly be good. Ace's little brother is a weird kid, I'm not going to lie. Luffy, obviously he doesn't know what's going on, but he didn't know what was going on when he activated Gear 5 in Wano either. He kind of seemed to just roll with it. So there he is, in all his Gear 5 Super Saiyan Luffy glory, ready to take Marineford by storm. Except how much is he going to take it by storm? The thing that we need to know, and trust me, I will jump into proceeding with Marineford soon, I just need to clarify one thing first, and that's how strong Gear 5 would be with Marineford Luffy. And the main thing about that is, within One Piece there's two key power systems. There's Devil Fruits and there's Haki. Now Luffy has a Devil Fruit, he's trained well with his Devil Fruit, he knows how to use the Gum no Mi. But the fact is, he doesn't know about Haki. Now how influential they become, because in the future, Haki and Devil Fruit for Luffy as well, seems to essentially become one and the same. Gear 4th relies on Haki. Gear 5th, you assume would be the same thing. How strong is Gear 5 if he doesn't have Observation Haki, if he doesn't have Armament Haki, if he can't use Roar or Conquerors Haki coating, or any of those things? I'd say it's still extremely strong, but I wouldn't say it's much stronger than, like, possibly Gear 4 with Haki, if that makes sense. As extremely powerful as a Devil Fruit would be, Luffy could still probably get hurt if a sufficiently strong person hits him with the might of their Haki. So there we are, Luffy's Devil Fruit has chosen to awaken. The abilities that he can probably do even without Haki are still limited to Devil Fruit. He can turn things to rubber the same way that Devil Fruit awakenings seem to do. The environment around him, people around him, which is weird for Luffy's Devil Fruit, that seems to be unique to him, and that he was able to turn like organic matter, such as Kaido, into having rubber properties. He can grow to an extremely large size. He can inflate his arms almost like he does in Gear 4, Gear 3, things like that. He can, basically have the abilities of Bounce Man. And for some strange reason, he has the ability to turn things into Looney Tunes. The cartoon powers are up and active. Everyone's eyes are bulging out of their heads like Bugs Bunny's just taken to the stage or something. They're working, and they're working well. And with such a ridiculous OP power, some fights are going to go down differently. In the actual timeline, Luffy vs Mihawk was a fight he was never going to win. I mean, he was willing to let Buggy get chopped in half in order to protect himself from Mihawk, which he probably wouldn't have to do in this situation, because I'm going to go ahead and say that with these ridiculously OP powers, he could probably fight against Mihawk. In fact, in this situation, I would argue he'd probably be able to fight against pretty much any Warlord or Admiral 1v1. I still think he would lose to them in an actual fight that had to proceed to the finish, but you need to remember that this isn't the goal of Luffy in this situation. He's not fighting against Mihawk because he wants to beat the world's strongest swordman. He didn't face off against the three admirals because he thought, I want to take down the three admirals. No, they were just obstacles in the way of him getting to Luffy. Even though he would lose in a fight, that's not his objective. He doesn't need to fight them. He just needs to get past them, get around them, get through them, go under them. He doesn't care as long as they are no longer in his way, are no longer in between him and Ace. So yes, even if Luffy does fight against Mihawk, even if Mihawk gets a couple hits in, there's nothing necessarily saying that they would damage him. The evidence for that is this panel, at least, from the Wano arc, where Kaido slams Luffy in the head with his Kanabo, and Luffy just kind of like bends around it. It's basically the same ability that he's always had with bullets, you know, blunt projectiles will just go through Luffy, and then using the properties of rubber, not gum this time, they just bounce back out of him. Except this time it can happen to bladed weapons, you know. Luffy gets sliced across the middle by Mihawk, his middle just goes with the blade. It's like trying to like cut a floating bit of paper or something. Like, it's just going to bounce away more often than not. Unless you're an extremely good swordsman, which admittedly Mihawk is, but you know, ridiculously OP cartoon fruit logic says Luffy is fine after that. So Luffy, using his ridiculously OP powers, can work his way through, you know. He bends a bit around Mihawk after his fight with him. He faces off against the three admirals, even if he gets kicked back or punched back again or something like that. He could probably just bounce his way back. Like, Akainu punches him, Luffy goes flying, he's made of rubber, he just hits a wall and bounces and flies straight past Akainu at a speed in which people have never seen before. You know, he's making Kizaru's speed of light fruit look like nothing with this speed. So he manages to work his way past the admirals, the warlords. Doflamingo can't get his strings on him because they just bounce off his rubber ability. Interestingly, there's no need for Inazuma in this situation to use his snip fruit to cut the ground up and make a path up to Ace, because Luffy is literally capable of just grabbing the ground with his bare hands and ripping it up, and like rubber, into forming into a path of his own. This is something he also does against Kaido. I'll probably put some of the manga panels on the screen to show these things happening, but Kaido uses a Borrow Breath attack on Luffy. Luffy just grabs the ground with like Gear 4 sized arms and lifts it up, and then the Borrow Breath bounces off the rubber ground and reflects back at Kaido. You know, it's a bit like Escanor in Seven Deadly Sins, where it's like, the only attack that can hurt me is my own attack. Well, Luffy's just reflecting people's attacks back at them, and it seems to work. So Luffy makes his own ramp up to the executioner's platform. He runs up there. Sengoku's really slow at reacting for some reason, which I always thought was strange in the actual manga / anime. But Luffy is there, he's with Ace. Now, he wouldn't necessarily need Mr. 3 to help him get the key, or he could, I don't know. Like, this is a question that I will put out to the people watching this video. Do you think a Devil Fruit Awakening with the ridiculously cartoon powers that Luffy has, would he be able to turn Sea Stone into the properties of rubber, in which case it could just slip off Ace's wrists? Because what they have is Sea Stone cuffs. It's why Ace couldn't use his Devil Fruit. It's why if Luffy grabbed them, he would lose effectively all his powers and become extremely fatigued. But Mr. 3 uses wax powers, which are a Devil Fruit power, and he could put that key into the Sea Stone cuffs and unlock them. So that didn't prevent him from using his Devil Fruit on them. So maybe Luffy just uses his rubber powers, turn the Sea Stone cuffs a lot rubberier, or Ace's wrists more rubbery, and then he can just slip them straight out of the cuffs. But if that isn't something you think is realistic, Mr. 3 is one of the executioners. He's literally right there. He could, like, Luffy could just say, hey, want to give me a hand? Which would probably be necessary, because admittedly, I'm having Luffy awaken his Devil Fruit in this scenario as opposed to Conqueror's Haki, so he wouldn't have that moment where he activates his Conqueror's Haki and stops the execution just before the blades take Ace's head off. But also, because I have him activating a little bit earlier than in canon, we also wouldn't have reached that situation quite yet, so it all works out in the end. I feel like that's just a tenet of a lot of my what if videos. If you see something that you're not sure about, just assume it all works out in the end. And from there, I don't actually need to input much, because for at least for a little bit, things would proceed as they did in the actual anime. You know, Sengoku goes to punch Ace and Luffy, killing them in one swift blow. Luffy inflates to a ridiculous size, and it just bounces straight off him. They jump down, they start fighting, and they become the most effective tag team since the Brothers of Destruction in the early 2000s. They work their way through all sorts of Marineford fodder, vice admirals, captains, whatever other ranks are available in navies. They fight their way through them, and they're making their way to safety when, just like normal, Akainu opens its big fat magma mouth. Now, there's always the possibility that Ace just doesn't listen to the taunts this time. He just turns around and they leave together. But that's a different video. In fact, it's the last video I posted on my channel. So if you do want to see that, it's the first one linked in the description and up in the cards. So yeah, avoiding things in that timeline, we're going to go slightly differently. Now, as always, Ace is absolutely my favourite character. So I do everything physically possible and within my power to make sure Ace survives these videos. But it's 50-50 at this point. Because the reason Ace died in the original timeline is, yes, he turned around to confront Akainu. Stupid move, Ace. He lost that fight to Akainu. Stupid move, Ace. Akainu jumps over Ace and attacks Luffy, who, because of his fatigue and the build-up of exhaustion, has fallen to the ground and is incapable of getting up. Ace jumps in front of Luffy and gets fisted by Akainu. Stupid move, Ace. You should have just grabbed Luffy and dived out the way. But whatever. That could still happen in this timeline because Gear 5 is an extremely tiring ability. It has a byproduct which results in extreme exhaustion to Luffy, who falls out of the Gear 5 state. Think about Gear 4 in Dressrosa, where he'd use it against Doflamingo, but he only has 10 minutes before he's effectively down and out and defenseless. Gear 5 had the same issue, although in Wano, he did show that he's capable of reactivating it immediately. We don't know the consequences of that or if it will have any effect on his health long term, but you know, his heart stopped beating to the drum beat pattern. Luffy just said, no, not yet, we're going for a second round, you know, we're going for an encore, round 2, you don't have a choice in this matter, and he caused his heart to start beating in the rhythm again, and Gear 5 burst back into life. Now, whether that happens or not literally determines Ace's continued existence, you know. If Luffy falls out of Gear 5 and he can't reactivate it, Ace dives in front of it, gets fisted, dies, all very sad. If he can reactivate it, Luffy could probably dodge, deflect or block Akainu's attack on his own. You know, he wouldn't need Ace to jump in to save him, so he could probably just avoid it and save them both effectively. And even if you consider that Luffy probably wouldn't run out of Gear 5 at this point, this was also the point where, you know, exhaustion just caught up with him anyway. You know, the effect of Ivankov's hormones and the fights in Impel Down and the poison that he'd received. So you could just say Gear 5 like countered them, or for some reason, you know, the rubber properties flushed all the badness out of his body in an extremely convenient plot device that had no form of merit whatsoever. So yeah, Ace and Luffy dying and living is a personal choice, and since I'm the one making the video, Ace is going to survive. Leave a like if you're happy that Ace survived. But yes, Ace and Luffy with Gear 5 together, they could probably continue the fight with Akainu going, you know, like in the original scene. You know, Ace died and Akainu just seemed to just float about a little bit. Like Vista and Marco came in to deflect him, to stop him from killing Luffy straight away again. But if Luffy's got Gear 5 active and Ace is raring to go, they could probably take him on together. I'm not saying they'd win, in fact I absolutely believe they'd lose. But at the very least they wouldn't die immediately. Which is more than you would think. Because this is a battlefield. This isn't just a 2v1 fight and they go until one dies. You know, this is a pirates fight. Interference is rife. Marco and Vista, they probably come in as well. Suddenly it's 4v1. Akainu still probably wins that fight. Even against, you know, Ace, Marco, Gear 5, Luffy and Vista. I still put my money with Akainu winning that. But, you know, things start getting a bit more awkward. Jinbei comes in. Maybe he's there blocking now and then. I don't fancy Akainu's chances of killing anyone at that point, because these people are too strong, too tanky, and too experienced to fall for his tricks anymore. You know, Ace wants to do something dumb, he's not going to have the chance to, because there's 4 other people around to slap him and say, hey, idiot, how many people do you think died just to keep you alive there? Are you going to throw that all away now? No, turn around and fuck off. Like, in the most polite way possible, they knock some sense into Ace and get him to flee. But yeah, Gear 5 Luffy and Ace versus Akainu, I'd say they'd definitely be fine until help arrives. So everyone starts fleeing Marineford. Now, in a lot of my videos that cover Marineford, especially what ifs, I make a big deal about whether or not Whitebeard survives, what that means for the future of Blackbeard, but that I feel like I've overdone that so much now that I don't want to repeat it. If you want to hear my opinion on how events of Marineford go, with Ace surviving, with Whitebeard dying, with Whitebeard living, with Blackbeard dying, with Blackbeard living, literally all my what ifs before this encompass that. What if Ace survived Marineford? What if Luffy joined the Whitebeard Pirates? Both cover that in extreme detail, so I would just say check those videos out, as always linked in the description and up in the cards. So I'm going to let that play out however you want to imagine it, and I'm going to focus on Luffy. Luffy and Ace and whatever flee, you know, on Law's submarine sewer. He doesn't need to to perform life-saving surgery on Luffy this time. They just need to get the hell out of there, and Law can offer a hand. So, with Ace, Marco, and Luffy with Gear 5 there, I don't think Law's going to look at all those in front of him and say, no, I'm going to get out of here on my own, thanks, because he wouldn't have a ship for much longer. So they flee Marineford into the sunset and live happily ever after. That's all for this video. Nah, I'm just fucking with you. Of course I'm going to go into the time skip. Luffy fleeing from Marineford with Gear 5 active does have some repercussions. Now, as always, there needs to be a time skip. If you want to know what happens when there isn't a time skip, watch Tekking 101's video exactly on that. It doesn't end well for the Straw Hats. But what does Luffy need to learn? He's got Gear 5 activated. He can face off against the best of the best and be completely fine. Why can't he just go into the New World and make a name for himself? Well, it's because he doesn't know haki whatsoever, and someone undoubtedly will point that out to him. If he's fled with Ace, Marco, and whatever's left of Whitebeard, then one of them will just say, hey, you're extremely strong. You're not ready for the New World yet. There's this thing that you need to know about, and it's called haki. And we can still do the same old with Rayleigh coming up, them isolating themselves for 2 years and doing it. How you would get the message to the rest of the Straw Hat is a bit indeterminate, but it could literally be anywhere possible. Instead of turning up at Marineford and, ringing the Oxaloid bell or whatever it was called 16 times and throwing flowers, he could just turn up at Sabayori, he could turn up at, I don't know, anywhere you could imagine where there's press and make a big deal out of it, and they will get a picture taken of him that will circulate around the newspapers. He can do 3D2Y in any way possible. Marineford was just the most dramatic. And then the time skip plays out pretty similarly to how it did originally. The only difference is Luffy already has Gear 5 activated. So in the time skip, he learns haki, armament, observation. He learns slightly how to control his conquerors haki. He gets Gear 4th Snake Man. He gets Gear 4th Bound Man, and he makes them his own. But he's also got the existence of Gear 5 as his true trump card. This is effectively what Gear 4 was originally, just now he has a better version of this. Gear 4 has almost been knocked down to Gear 3, and Gear 5 is now Gear 4, if that makes sense. I did not explain that very succinctly whatsoever. But basically, Gear 5 is the trump card. If he's losing a fight, he activates his plot armor ability. He lifts up the Uno reverse card. He says, no, you've activated my trap card. Gear 5 goes activated. Something like that. He's effectively undefeatable to anyone below Yonkos at this point. Because Katakuri was a hard fight, okay, but Gear 4th managed to win out in the end. Doflamingo was a hard fight. The earliest version of Gear 4 managed to win out in the end. Caesar Clown wasn't really a hard fight. He won that quite easily, to be honest. So there's no issues for Luffy, literally up until Whole Cake Island, because, Big Mom's there, and then Wano following that. But we'll work our way through until we get there. In the meantime, however, the world has still been moving. 2 years as time skip hasn't really had much impact on Luffy other than his abilities, but the world's still rolling, the world's still turning, events are still happening. Luffy's bounty has shot through the roof. With the existence of Gear 5 and the reveal of what it is, I know I said the Gorosei are well aware of what Luffy's Devil Fruit truly is, the true power behind it, but now so is the rest of the world. He's been famous for effectively having one of the most ridiculous devil fruits in existence. His bounty is shooting up there because his danger to the world government and its stability has also shot up there. Luffy's bounty post-time skip with Gear 5 revealed to the world is definitely in the billion berry mark, if not more than that. Maybe it's 1.1, 1.2 billion berry, only held back by the fact that he hasn't been active for 2 years and he doesn't really have territory to claim beyond that. Yonkos are emperors of the sea. Emperors have their own land. Yonkos have their own protectorates. Whitebeard had Fishman Island, he had Sphinx, he had all sorts of islands. Big Mom has Whole Cake Island, Kaido has the entirety of Wano, Shanks probably has some islands that he's called his own. Luffy doesn't have any of that. He's not a danger currently, he's not a risk currently, he doesn't have the influence currently to be up there with the 2, 3, 4, 5 billion berry bounties in the world. He's just really strong and really terrifying, and the world knows it, so he has a bounty to match that. Now, there would be a significant strength disparity immediately following the time skip between Luffy and his crew, but at the same time, that's kind of always been the case. In Dressrosa, Gear 4 Luffy could have soloed the entirety of his crew. Beyond that, I believe Gear 5 Luffy could probably get close to doing that now. Maybe he's not, like Zoro, Jinbei, Yamato if she joins Sanji, they're all quite strong now, but like it'd take a lot of them combined to beat Luffy with Gear 5 in my mind. The same way it'd take a few of them combined to face off against Kaido or Big Mom or Shanks or Blackbeard, because while they can one-on-one versus Yonko commanders, they're not Yonkos for a reason. They work under a Yonko. There's a significant strength disparity between them in my mind. But jumping straight into the post-time skip event, Fishman Island is a complete joke. Hardy Jones gets one shot by Luffy, who could activate Gear 4 and then just end the arc right there. There's not much to say beyond that. Same with Punk Hazard. Caesar Clown, a dangerous opponent, admittedly. I've said before that he has like an S-rank Devil Fruit because he seems like he could be able to fight one-on-one with Yonkos if he did it smartly, ambush them, make some extremely poisonous gas that they can't see, infect it into their lungs and then watch them die a slow, pretty horrible death. Like, if Kaido's sleeping drunk and he just like fills a closed room off with like carbon monoxide or methane or chlorine or something like that, like that'd kill most people. I imagine it'd work with at least one of the Yonkos. So yeah, an extremely dangerous Devil Fruit. Gear 5 doesn't care about how dangerous your Devil Fruit is. It's the most ridiculous power in the world for a reason, Luffy's rubber body would probably just bounce the gases back away from him, so Caesar Clown poses no issues whatsoever. Proceeding with Dressrosa, again, Gear 4th is something that Luffy would probably use at first against Doflamingo. And then, even if things look bad, he can just activate Gear 5. I've said before that I thought Gear 5 may be a thing that Luffy was holding back as a trump card for, just to fight against the Yonkos. He didn't want to reveal his hand, reveal his abilities too early. But then there were a lot of situations, especially post-time skip, where Luffy, it looked like he would die if he didn't have something stronger than that. So if he had a Gear 5, why wouldn't he activate it? So, the first time Gear 4 doesn't work against Doflamingo, instead of risking his life, the life of his crew, the life of his newly found brother Sabo, he's probably just going to turn Gear 5 on and end the fight within the span of a minute. So again, Dressrosa, not very exciting anymore. Luffy is too strong for these people. Moving into Whole Cake Island, things start getting interesting. Luffy is a realistic force that could fight against Big Mom at this point in time. Whether the others could take on anyone else is different. Could Zoro and Whole Cake Island fight against Katakuri and win? Who knows? Maybe that fight wouldn't even come about anymore. It wouldn't be necessary because the Straw Hats don't need to flee from Big Mom. Big Mom is not this destructive force that would wipe the Straw Hats out. She's someone who Luffy could realistically hold back, fight against, hold off, and then flee with his life intact. Now that could influence the plan that they proceed with altogether. Law may accommodate for Luffy's strength in his plan. Capone Beige may realise Luffy's stronger than he thinks and may change things with the plan that he makes. Brooke smashes the photo of Mother Caramel, I think that was her name. Big Mom loses her mind. Maybe the Conquerors haki isn't going to have as much an effect on Luffy. Maybe he can get a few good hits in and affect Big Mom a bit more than he did in the actual timeline. I don't think he'd defeat Big Mom, because defeating a Yonko one-on-one is something that I don't even think Gear 5 is capable of doing at the minute. And if you dare point to Luffy vs Kaido and say, look, he could probably beat him one-on-one, I want you to go back, reread the rooftop Onigashima fight and count just how many people Kaido has fought against. And you dare to call that a one-on-one, don't come and talk to me about that. Kaido has fought like 20 different people in this fight alone. Luffy is not beating him one-on-one whatsoever. Kaido is taking on all comers, the entire world if it needs to be. If he loses at the end of this to Luffy, Luffy has 100% not beat him one-on-one. He's beaten like 30% of Kaido one-on-one after he fought everyone else in existence. But I still think things would go differently, especially in Wano, which we'll get to soon. But Luffy fights against Big Mom, and they still flee with the Straw Hats in the end, having achieved their objective of getting the road poneglyph and recovering Sanji. There is also the potential that Sanji doesn't decide to leave and Whole Cake Island as an arc becomes void. The reason for that is Sanji left to go with Big Mom and the Germans because he understood the risk that they both posed to the Straw Hats and crew. He didn't want to risk his crew's life or the lives of his friends for himself. He thought it was selfish. He was effectively sacrificing himself for the greater good. But with him being fully aware of how strong Luffy is, or Luffy can be with Gear 5, he may take things the other way and just come clean, and like when Luffy gets there, he just says, Luffy, we're in some major trouble at the minute. This is the situation. What do you think we should do? That's a possibility, which in that case Whole Cake Island goes differently, but it still occurs. You know, the only way for them to stop Big Mom and Germa from coming for Sanji, Luffy would probably say, fine, we're going to them and we're going to show them that nobody takes a member of my crew. You know, it's a bit like the Robin situation with CP9. CP9 wanted Robin, they took her, and then Luffy had to go get her back. But if he found out now that CP9's after you, he's probably going to say, fine, I'm going to find them and show them why you don't take a member of my crew. That seems like how I imagine Luffy would react to a situation like this. And then that's what he does. You know, he sails straight into Whole Cake Island. He doesn't even bother going undercover anymore. He's like, fine, I will find you. Charlotte Katakuri, I will take you on. You know, Charlotte Smoothie, I will take you on. Charlotte Oven, I will take you on. You, all three of you at once, if needs be. And then I will find Big Mom and show her why you don't mess with the Straw Hats crew members. So yeah, that is a big potential difference in Whole Cake Island. I still think it would be a really cool way for the arc to go if things went that way. Luffy just invading the Yonkos to show that he could, and then, you know, retreating with his crew intact and showing that we're not something to be messed with. Don't keep coming after my crew members. Again, he's not going to dethrone Big Mom. He's not going to conquer Whole Cake Island. He's not going to defeat the majority of them. He's just going to show that they can't really defeat him. And that's what's important. Following this arc, however, you know, this is when in the normal timeline Luffy became known as the 5th Emperor of the Seas, the 5th Yonko. He invaded a Yonko's territory and left with his life intact. Once the world sees that, they're going to take it a bit differently. You know, after 2 long years, Straw Hat Luffy is finally making his move. He's cementing his place in this world. The Billion-Berry Bounty Man is showing why it should be more. So, you know, things could go up from there, especially if he goes the invasion route as opposed to the undercover route in Whole Cake Island. So yeah, Luffy's bounty at this point, definitely boosted, definitely 2 billion berries. 2.2, 2.3, I'd say somewhere around there. Because he's gone into Big Mom's territory, he's slapped her around a bit, and he's left. Okay, yes, he probably fled with his crew because, you know, he realised he's not going to take on the entirety of Big Mom's lineage on his own with Gear 5, you know, probably pushing its limits after fighting against her. But he still did it. He still entered the lion's den and walked away with one of its teeth, effectively. People are going to see that, people are going to hear about that, especially with the presence of, you know, whoever else was there, and they're going to recognise that for what it is. A Yonko fighting against another Yonko, effectively. So they leave, they end up in Zou, possibly, you know, Jack the Drought has already done his deeds on the world, you know, the Mink tribe's been heavily impacted by this, they've both lost limbs, Rhizoid's still alive and whatnot, and they have a reason to go to Wano. The Wano arc, it proceeds really differently, actually. In fact, this is the biggest difference in the entire story, probably so far, possibly bar Marineford, because the linchpin of the Wano arc is Luffy wasn't strong enough to fight Kaido in the start of it. In fact, that literally is what led to him getting thrown in jail and meeting Kid. He fought Kaido, Kaido essentially one-shot him. Luffy isn't being one-shot by Kaido if he's in Gear 5. I don't think he's winning against Kaido, but they can fight around for a decent while, I would say. I still think Luffy loses the fight overall, but I don't think Kaido comes out of it unscathed, you know what I mean? But at the same point, if Luffy loses the fight against Kaido, Kaido isn't going to put this Luffy in jail. Luffy with the ability of Gear 5 is not someone weak enough that Kaido thinks, I can break him and force him to join my crew. He's looking at like, this is a threat to my position within Wano and my place as a Yonko. This is a threat that needs to be eliminated. If Luffy loses that fight, stays and fights and loses, Luffy doesn't live beyond that day. Kaido kills him, and there is no one who can help him with that because Law wasn't there at that point. Kid isn't there to help them. So for the sake of what is effectively the longest arc in all of One Piece, continuing beyond about 10 chapters, I would say that the Luffy vs Kaido fight effectively comes to a stalemate with Luffy in Gear 5. He's realising Gear 5 is running out, even though the battle versus him and Kaido is going okay, and he, you know, makes a tactical retreat. Now, Luffy's not an idiot. He's not someone who's going to be like, no, I'm fighting this guy and I'm fighting and beating him now, regardless of any risk to me or my crew. If he sees things are going bad, if he realises this is a fight I don't need to do right now, and this is a fight that in a couple of minutes I am going to probably lose, he will call it there, I think, and back away. So with that, things can still proceed with Wano. If Luffy decides to go to the prison and free people through there, that is a possibility. Events could proceed to lead him to wanting to cause a prison break, you know. He could still meet Tama, he could still meet Hiyori and anyone. They could still encounter a few of the scabbards, but essentially they wouldn't need to split up like they did originally. You know, they wouldn't need to effectively wait until the Onigashima festival. They wouldn't need to do any of that. They could still do it though, just for the sake of, this is a 4-year arc, and me rewriting it in its entirety to accommodate that Luffy already knows Gear 5 is not something I am capable of doing within the span of 1 year, let alone like the 2 weeks that I spend on these what if videos. So yeah, let's just skip forward to Roof Peace effectively. The Straw Hat Grand Fleet is making its move. The alliance between Luffy, Law and Kid is there. It's making its move as well. Everyone, the Scabbards are attacking Kaido. Yamato has been freed from her chains because Luffy would definitely be capable of doing that by now. And the fight has kicked off. It ends in a win for the Straw Hats alliance. You know, even if Big Mom has turned up there, like chasing after Luffy, Law and Kid have to separate off. The fact is, Luffy, who has Gear 5 from the start, I think wins. And there is reasons for that. Kaido has already been injured, even if not greatly, by the Scabbards, the coalition of Luffy, Law, Kid, everyone else involved. You know, Zoro gets a few good attacks in here and there. Maybe Sanji gets a kick or two in here and there. Luffy with Gear 5, instead of Gear 4, could probably deal a significant amount more damage than Luffy did originally. Because when Luffy has Gear 5 activated, he was beating Kaido pretty bad. Like, we haven't seen the outcome of the fight yet, which makes this what if video quite difficult to round off, but I fully believe that Gear 5 Luffy, especially if it's something he has more experience in as opposed to something that he just discovers during the fight, would be capable of beating Kaido when he has this much assistance with him. You know, Kaido has also deviated a lot of his strength in order to keep Onigashima floating. So he is distracted, he is outnumbered, and with Gear 5, I think he is outclassed. I think this would end undoubtedly with the fall of Kaido from his position as Emperor of Wano. Whether this would end in Kaido's death or capture is a completely different matter. This is how I personally believe the actual timeline will go in the real manga. I believe Kaido will be beaten. I believe Kaido will be defeated and dethroned from Wano. I don't think it's the last we'll see of him. I don't think it's going to be a Doflamingo situation where the next we see Kaido is him locked up at the bottom of Impel Down, because I don't believe there is a prison that can hold him. I think he will flee, he will be forced to retreat, and he will return possibly in the future. But the fact is, this is at least a happy ending for Wano. Luffy has kicked Kaido out, Big Mom is licking her wounds from wherever she ended up at the bottom of the depths of the world, wherever Kid and Law sent her to. The Straw Hats and their alliance have defeated 2 Yonkos and have freed the country of Wano to the world. The drums of liberation are running rife, and the freer of the people, Joy Boy Luffy, whatever their relation is, has finally activated his destiny. And from there, who knows? Because I certainly don't. I think the only people who do are Oda and his editors, because who knows what the arcs will be following this. He could turn up at Elbaf, he could go straight for Blackbeard if he is still around, who knows. That is the end of this video. For the future, you can make it up on your own, or you can come back to this video in like 5 years when One Piece has ended and see how things would have gone with Luffy knowing Gear 5 from this point. But until then, that is all for this video. Like the video if you did enjoy it. Comment anything that you think I missed, that you think I got wrong, that you think I needed to consider, or any what ifs that you want me to do. I do community polls on my channel, so you can vote for the next what if. In fact, from the posting of this video, there should be one live now, so go ahead and vote on that to let me know what you want to see. And yeah, thanks for watching.